wanted to briefly tell the story of a little overview of Namaste Solar and some of its spinoffs. I think the word spinoff might imply a subsidiary or that a parent company owns the other companies. As you'll see in true cooperative fashion, maybe we should call ours spring-offs, but some of the companies that sprung out of the employee ownership culture, the cooperative culture of Namaste Solar, I'm excited to tell the story about those. Namaste Solar is an employee-owned cooperative and a certified B Corp. About 15 years old, almost 16 years. We're a solar electric contractor and consultant. So we're essentially kind of like a glorified electrical contractor. We're around 40 million in revenue. We had 200 people right before COVID, and the story of how employee-owned companies and cooperatives lay people off or furlough people is a whole different story in and of itself. But we have not been unaffected by COVID. And our tagline is transforming energy, transforming business. And this kind of sums up our mission. We're really passionate about solar energy and the benefits that it can provide to the world, but we're also really passionate about proving there's a better way to do business than the conventional norm. At Namaste Solar, we have a very strong employee ownership culture, and we employee owners call ourselves co-owners, and we have what's called our pillars of co-ownership, things that are really, really important to our employee ownership culture. Cooperative ownership, one person, one share, one vote, extreme transparency, and democratic decision-making. We don't practice democratic decision-making for everything. A lot of our democratic decisions are to vote for team leads or vote for our board of directors. Yeah, so we don't, as a 175 person company, we don't vote on everything, but we do consider ourselves a democratic workplace. And just like the United States is a democratic country, and we're not voting all the time, we vote once a year in November. Being a democratic workplace is about more than just decision making. It's about other democratic principles like fairness and accountability, checks and balances, and transparency. So we consider ourselves a very democratic workplace. It costs $5,000, about the cost of a used car, to become an employee owner, to become a co-owner. And that's after you've served a 1-year candidacy period. You've been a candidate for 1 year. We have all of our books are open. All of our meetings are open. We even practice pay transparency, so everybody knows each other's wages and salary levels. And at the end of the day, it's a very high engagement culture. People are very engaged in our democratic workplace. They're very engaged in our employee ownership culture. And this is the culture out of which some beautiful things, some wonderful things have sprung. A lot of people ask us, this is a really quirky culture, does it work? And I think what's nice is after 15 years, we can demonstrate some ways in which our model has been successful. And from a very conventional perspective, the way conventional businesses might measure success, we've had #1 market share in Colorado for a good portion of our existence, 50% compound annual growth rate for the first 11 years. We were growing very, very rapidly. We've been profitable 13 out of our 15 years. And we've had really high retention of our co-owners, really high employee retention. A lot of conventional business perspectives would say, oh, those are good things. We measure success differently, and we call them holistic metrics, but we've installed over 8,000 solar PV systems. We're really excited about that. The average total pay per employee at our company has increased every year. We've got when you're a certified B Corp, you have what's called a B score or an impact score, and we're among the top 20% of B Corps with that impact score. We've got a high net promoter score, which is when you survey your customers, which we do very regularly. I think we have around a 45% response rate. Would they recommend us to others? We've got a good net promoter score, and we've donated over $1 million of our employee owners' money to nonprofits in our community. So by all the ways that conventional business world and we ourselves measure it, this quirky model has been successful. It's also been nice to get some third-party validation, so to speak. Winning awards boosts our employee owners' morale, but it's also helpful just to say, this isn't our quirky company saying that we're doing something right. It's nice to have some others who are saying that too. So during our 15 years, though, it hasn't all been rainbows and unicorns. We've had our share of challenges, especially when we've been growing rapidly. Growing rapidly is exciting, but it's also really difficult. And we've had a hard time saying no and slowing down. And part of the reason why we were growing quickly. Part of it was we were excited about it, but another one was we were concerned that the big fish would eat the small fish in the solar industry. It's been a fast-growing industry. A lot of our competitors and the market share leaders are big publicly traded companies. We were worried about the big fish eating the small fish. And so while on one hand we didn't want to be big, we consider ourselves a small company. We like having a small company culture where everyone knows each other, but we also wanted to harness economies of scale. We wanted to still be able to compete with the big fish. And one of the most common debates we have at our company is the quantity versus quality debate. You know, we want to quantitatively have an impact. We want to install more solar panels. We want more people to experience what it's like to be an employee owner. Those quantitative things are important to a lot of us. And at the same time, we've found that when we have been growing the fastest, that's when a lot of qualitative characteristics at our company have suffered the most, such as culture and safety and customer service and quality of work. So quantity versus quality, some people at our company believe we can have our cake and eat it too. We can do both. A lot of others believe it's tough to do both at the exact same time. So that's been an interesting one and a big challenge for us. And another challenge is that finding patient, non-controlling, mission-aligned capital that allows us to supports us in being who we are has been tough. And when you're growing rapidly, you need capital. We've had all of our employee owners invest in the company. A lot of us invested our life savings, and it still wasn't enough. We needed to get capital from an outside source. And that was tough. That was scary because we didn't want to take money from the usual suspects. And by that, I mean venture capital funds or private equity funds or traditional angel investors who, whenever we talked to them in the early days, they all wanted us to grow, and then eventually sell. And we don't ever want to sell. We want to be an employee-owned company in perpetuity. So finding capital to help us grow in the way that we want to grow and fulfill our mission has been tough. The good news is that last one, we have been able to find mission-aligned capital, and a big thank you to the likes of Equal Exchange and Organic Valley, to large, long-standing cooperatives that really set an inspiring, positive example for us in creating a class of non-voting preferred stock. We took a page out of their playbook and did the same thing, and I know that a lot of other companies have, like Real Pickles in Massachusetts and Tootie's Tempeh, a new worker cooperative in Maine, Maple Valley Cooperative, others have done it. But that's helped us to raise around 5 million or a little over 5 million from 135 impact investors. And to do it in such a way that doesn't compromise our mission or our employee-owned cooperative structure or force us to grow and pursue a big liquidity event where we sell the company someday. When we did this, and when we were doing it, we found a lot of companies saying, well, we'd love to be able to do that too. How do we do it? And we often pointed to who inspired us, Equal Exchange from Organic Valley. And we had a lot of investors also come and say, hey, is Namaste Solar still raising money? I want to invest. And our offering, we weren't raising more money, but they would say, well, are there other companies like you that we could invest in? And I'll plant that seed because later that led to one of the Spinoffs that came out of Namaste Solar, because there's such a big need for both impact companies or mission-driven companies and impact investors to do some of that matchmaking. So how did it start, these spin-offs or these spring-offs? A big part of it was just, we're seeing challenges, impediments, barriers on a day-to-day basis, and we're trying to figure out how to solve them. And as well as the opportunities. Hey, here's some opportunities. And we've had a lot of innovative ideas pop up at Namaste Solar, and then we do a check. Well, wait a minute, we're a solar electric company. That's beyond our scope. That's not something that we as a company should be doing. We shouldn't try to do everything. And while that was happening, we've got a lot of team members at our company who are excited by some of these new ideas and pursuing these new ideas, and they're wanting new career opportunities, or they're just wanting to spice things up if they're from doing the same thing day in and day out with their day jobs. And then also we've had a lot of values aligned partners who wanted to collaborate. And these are companies that we've met over the years at solar industry conferences, at B Corp conferences, at NCEO conferences. As you meet these companies, you get to know them year after year. You start realizing, hey, we have some of the same challenges. We want some of the same things. How can we work together to solve some of these challenges? So this is kind of the fertile ground, plus just the culture that our company had, that led to initially starting a purchasing cooperative. And at first we were thinking of a buying group. We didn't know that there was a type of cooperative called purchasing cooperative. There's over 250 of them in the United States. But the idea was, let's aggregate our purchasing power so that we can get better prices on solar panels. And one of the biggest things that our national publicly traded competitors, one of their biggest competitive advantages is that they buy millions and millions of dollars worth of solar equipment, and therefore they get cheaper pricing. So we thought, why don't we group together with other independently owned solar companies so that we can get cheaper prices or better terms on solar equipment. And it's been an incredible success. So it's almost 10 years old now. Last year we purchased over 200 million worth of solar equipment through the cooperative. That's a lot of purchasing power. And that came from now 59 member companies. And these are all independently owned solar companies across the country and in Puerto Rico and Canada, with an average of 16 years in business. 23 of them are certified B Corps, and we have another 15 that are in the certification process. 17 are employee owned and another 13 in conversion. And by the way, the vast majority of those were not employee owned companies when they joined the cooperative. They were inspired and influenced by the other members of the cooperative to say, hey, maybe we should take a look at employee ownership. And it's been wonderful to see that kind of influence of members to one another. We kind of call the purchasing cooperative, it's like the Ace Hardware of solar companies. And Ace Hardware, as you may know, and so same with True Value Hardware, purchasing cooperatives, where mom and pop hardware stores, that allows them to better compete with the likes of Home Depot and Lowe's. And the same thing we're finding with our solar companies. But the aggregated purchasing power is a big advantage, but we found that it's not as valuable, or we found more value out of best practice sharing. So we have multiple retreats a year. We have lots of webinars. We have different software platforms where you can ask a question saying, hey, I'm dealing with this challenge. And you can get 58 other companies responding to you saying, here's how we handled that, or yes, we dealt with that once, or here's someone we recommend you go talk to. It's been incredibly valuable. And a good example is that employee ownership. Somebody thinking, well, I don't want to sell my company, but I'm getting close to retirement age. What should I do? Or just, I really like hearing what I've heard about other employee-owned companies. What can I do? And there's so many resources, people saying, well, here's how we converted. Here are the technical resources that we had. And we do lots of webinars on employee ownership. Another thing we have is peer groups. So you may have heard of like Vistage or YPO. We have that within the purchasing cooperative, groups of 7 or 8 owners or CEOs, but also groups of marketing directors and CFOs. And those peer groups are fantastic ways to just support one another, someone with a similar job role facing similar challenges as you. And the purchasing cooperative has been a wonderful success. And it's also been another fertile ground for more collaboration. So a group of these companies wanted to do maintenance on solar, the growing number of solar companies throughout the country, but not everyone wanted to be involved. So a resource sharing cooperative, the Amicus O&M cooperative, O&M stands for operations and maintenance, which is a common term in the construction world, that wanted to go after large national contracts of maintaining solar systems. It's almost 5 years old now, and it shares resources, in particular labor, to be able to dispatch technicians who are locally based in 39 different states, and it's got 25 member companies, and it services a lot of solar systems. So imagine Namaste Solar based in Colorado, and we want to get a contract to maintain solar systems on Target stores throughout the country. Well, if something breaks down in California, we don't want to have to fly somebody out to California to do maintenance on it. But there are other cooperative members based in California that can locally dispatch their boots on the ground to go and service that for us. And we know that they're trained in the same way, they'll do work to the same standard, and there's agreed upon rates that we would pay them. So it's been very successful, and it's growing rapidly, and the resource sharing cooperative is another fun example. Then another thing we noticed was that a lot of people who want to put solar panels on their roof, it's about the cost of a car. It's expensive, and a lot of the financing options out there, there aren't many of them, and they're very expensive. We talked with other green home improvement contractors and found the same thing, that it's hard to find good, affordable financing to do green home improvements. So we knocked on the doors of many banks and credit unions saying, hey, we think this is a wonderful opportunity. Why don't you get into this? And none of them wanted to. So we and a broader group of clean energy geeks thought, let's start something ourselves. So we started Clean Energy Credit Union. It took us 3 years to get our federal charter. We finally got it in 2017. And Clean Energy Credit Union, which is online only, it focuses solely on clean energy lending. So getting loans for solar electric systems, geothermal systems, green home improvements. You can get an auto loan, but it's got to be electric vehicle. Everything has to have a clean energy theme. When we do mortgages next year, it'll have to be a net zero energy mortgage or a green home mortgage. And it has taken off. We are overwhelmed with loan demand. It's done over 35 million in clean energy lending in just its first 2 years. And we're out to help other credit unions. We're training a lot of other credit unions right now how to do clean energy lending, because one of the ways in which we'll bring down the cost of clean energy is to make the financing more affordable, and clean energy credit unions off to a good start in doing that. Then I mentioned earlier the companies that were asking us, how did you raise money? We want to raise money from mission-aligned investors too. And then we had a lot of investors saying, we want to invest in companies that are doing good in the world, employee-owned companies, and how do we do that? And so we started an investment cooperative. It's called Kochua Impact Fund, and kind of call it like a mutual fund of impact investments on Main Street. So nothing that it holds is publicly traded. It's all privately held. It's over 20 million in assets now. It's invested in about 4 dozen different companies, and a lot of them, you'll see some of the logos on the right. A lot of them are ones that you'll recognize. A lot of cooperatives, a lot of employee-owned companies, a lot of certified B Corps. That all has to. There's 9 impact themes, but it has been a wonderful success, allowing impact investors to invest in a diversified portfolio of companies like this, and also helping us to aggregate smaller checks so that we can write larger checks to the companies that we're investing in, and they'll know this is a patient source of money. We don't want any controlling stake. We just want to support them in fulfilling their mission. And then I like to joke, the next cooperative is coming soon. We don't know what it is yet. We've got kicking around a bunch of ideas, but the good news is we've done this a few times. Our broader group, the ecosystem that we've sprung off a bunch of these different cooperatives. It gets easier with each one, and the institutional knowledge, I should say, or the ecosystem knowledge and know-how and level of confidence grows. So we think it's going to be easier to do in the future. Some lessons learned about the how. Hard to provide a short, concise summary, but investing time and energy in collaborative relationships and building a community of potential partners was very worthwhile. You just never know when you're going to want to work together with others, and we're a bunch of cooperative geeks, so we naturally like making these relationships, but they're incredibly important. And the more of those you have, you take an inventory of what you've got going on for these kinds of things, and that's the biggest, most valuable asset you can have. We've learned a lot about balancing shared interests versus disparate interests. That happens. I think the O&M cooperative I mentioned earlier is a great example where not everyone in Amicus Solar Cooperative wanted to do maintenance on solar projects. So just those groups that were interested in doing it, they went and started another organization. And we encourage that a lot, but we've had some good experience balancing those things. I think the hardest part is getting started when you're wanting to do something like this. And if you just have enough critical mass of what I call leadership mojo, enough critical mass of leadership mojo, just get something started, lead the way, and others will want to join in. As soon as that train starts moving, it's amazing how many more people want to get on board rather than when the train is still at the station and it hasn't left yet. So just getting some early organizing, getting some critical mass, getting going, people want to join in. We've also found that it's a lot easier to start with a draft vision rather than a blank slate. So there is a brainstorming period that's very important, figuring out what you're going to do. But at some point, it's better to just propose something rather than take it to a group and say, here's a blank slate, what should we do? Because it's a lot easier to edit than it is to start from scratch. Even if you end up redlining half of the business plan or half of the vision, we found that it's a lot easier for partners to edit something than it is to start with a blank slate. And then we use what I call milestone checkpoints. It makes it a lot easier when you break things into bite-sized chunks, but also to say, we don't have to commit to the whole shebang right now. Let's just commit to doing the feasibility study. And then when we get done with the feasibility study, let's reassess and say, do we want to get to the next milestone? Maybe that's we're going to complete our business plan. And then when we get to the end of the business plan, let's decide if we want to move forward from there. And we found that one of the most important decisions is when are you going to pool money to hire staff? That's a big one, because you're also asking somebody to commit to it, maybe potentially change their jobs. And you don't just want to have them saying, we're committing to 2 months worth of salary, let's see what happens. So it's a pretty big decision when you commit to hiring staff for a new spring off. And then also some lessons learned on the why. we have found, in theory, we had a lot of theories about why we wanted to do this, and they've all turned out to be correct. Growing the ecosystem, growing the movement, fulfilling our mission. It's been great to learn that at Namaste Solar, we don't just have to fulfill our mission or pursue our mission at our organization. We can also fulfill our mission outside of our organization by creating other organizations, partnering with others, and doing things outside of Namaste Solar. So that's been fun. We've also learned that we can grow cellularly. We like cellular growth over vertical growth. You don't have to grow all of that within Namaste Solar. That's helped us to slow down our growth and to realize that actually cellular growth is a lot better than vertical growth for many things. The tagline of Amicus Solar Cooperative is stronger together, and it's beautifully concise. We have definitely learned that we can accomplish way more together with others than we can on our own, and it's been great to see that come to fruition. And then I mentioned earlier, the career development opportunities. A lot of our team members want to do new things, and some of our spring offs are led by former Namaste Solar employee owners. Not all of them. A lot of Namaste Solar employee owners just wanted to be involved in the committee that was writing the business plan. It was incredibly rewarding for them. Great personal growth, the career growth opportunities, and those are very valuable for our team members to be involved in these spring offs. So the way I put it is, ultimately we leveraged our affinity for shared ownership and collaboration in order to accomplish more with others than we ever could have accomplished by ourselves. And that all came from that passion for employee ownership, passion for cooperatives, passion for a lot of the values that I think we all have in common. And thanks for letting me do a little bit of storytelling.
Thank you so much for that, Blake. So we'll have a few minutes to get into some questions for Blake, and but first we're going to do one more short breakout of about 5 minutes, and the prompt for this one will be similar to the last. Do a round of introductions, saying your name, your company, organization. But for this one, if you had a reaction to what you just heard from Blake, a question it raised, an idea it sparked, and then following that conversation, we'll come back, and then if you want to put questions in the chat, we'll do a few minutes with Blake, and then any questions we don't get to during the chat section, we'll kind of use as part of the conversation with Blake that we'll record in the final round. So we'll go into our second round of breakouts momentarily, and then we'll be back for a little Q&A. All right. Welcome back, folks. Hope you all had some good conversations. I know in my group I heard a few interesting questions that took down. So feel free to throw a few anything that you'd like to add to the chat. And I'll start it off with one question that came up in our group that was more on the sort of practical level, but I think there's some interest in, was around you mentioned the pay transparency thing, and do you want to talk a little bit about Blake, around the kind of role that plays? Are there any tensions that emerge around that level of transparency around compensation? Does it work well? What is the impact of that?
Yeah, pay transparency is very important at our company. Everyone's so used to it. I think if we were to try to take it away, everyone would revolt. But when I talk with other CEOs and when we present on the topic, most other CEOs, most other HR directors, they're just shocked. Like, how is that even possible? How are people not, not constantly emotional wrecks? And it's hard to imagine that when the corporate world even requires employees to stay confidential and not to share their pay. This is a really big topic, and I could talk for an hour about it, but at the end of the day, we find that it is an integrally positive, huge net positive part to our culture. And yeah, sometimes it's tough because you've got to explain to Bob why Sally makes more than Bob does, but it's also fantastic accountability. You can't have pay disparity among men and women because it's all right there for everyone to see, and the team leads who are making the decisions have to justify. If Bob's going to make more than Sally, you've got to explain why. But once you get practiced at these, once it's part of your culture, to having conversations about them. And at our company, someone new joins and they're like, wow, how does this all work? But then they see when we're all talking about it, it's no big deal to folks who've been at our company for a while. It's just something that you get used to and that you get into the practice of, and it is a wonderful benefit. But you can't go from no pay transparency at all the way to 100% pay transparency in one step. The same way you can't go from not being a non-employee owned company to being an employee owned company in one step. There's a transition period, and that's what we'd recommend if you wanted to do that.
So another question that was put in the chat before we broke out was someone just asked about you to maybe unpack a little bit more about this idea of like cellular growth and what that difference is and how you think about that.
Yeah, you can think of it within your organization. Like we, as a democratic workplace, the kind of modeled after U.S. Senate. 100 senators don't debate everything; they create committees, and the committees talk about things, and then they bring things to the rest of the company for a vote. We did that early on when we were smaller, so you can think of cellular growth within your company and just creating different departments or committees where people talk about things that they're interested in, that they're working on. But the way that I meant it during my presentation was, Namaste Solar is a solar electric company. We can't get involved in doing all the other things that the Spinoffs do. You just got to know what your company should and should not be doing. It can't do everything. And so, if we wanted to help address these, do that kind of work, and help fulfill that part of the ecosystem's mission, doing it as a cell, dividing into another cell, into another organization to do it. It's just thinking of it that way. Is this something we should be doing, or maybe we should be starting another company or starting another organization, or having it spin off in order to do it. So I think hopefully whoever asked the question understands it's about thinking of different organizations instead of having it all be centralized.
So there's two other questions in the chat right now that kind of relate to what you just said, but one is what is Namaste's operational role in forming and then managing the Spinoffs, and then what's your personal role at Namaste and or the Spinoffs right now?
Right. So Namaste Solar does not. These are separate entities, and they have their own staff. They have their own governance, their own board of directors. So they're completely separate. Namaste Solar was just, and I should say, it's sometimes the individuals in Namaste Solar, sometimes it was the company. We were just involved in helping to get them started, but we don't play a role in operating them, and that we think that's very important. These are separate organizations. Now, the organizations might have partnerships or might still be doing some things together, but we want those new organizations to be completely self-sufficient and independent on their own, even if we still collaborate afterwards. I stepped down as Namaste Solar CEO 4 years ago now. I'm still there part-time, helping out the new CEO and doing whatever special projects I can help with. And then I volunteer a lot of my time at Clean Energy Credit Union. I serve on the board there, and boards of credit unions, as people may know, are unpaid board members. And then I also volunteer my time at Kochua Impact Fund, and I really enjoy that. So I'm involved in a few of them, not all of them. Yeah.
And then in terms of the the co-op model, question here about kind of how did you learn about it in the sort of various approaches, right? The non-voting preferred shares, those other things. Was it something that you had, there were mentor relationships that helped you kind of understand those things? With an eye towards how do we make it easier for people to kind of know that these models are viable and can be done?
That's a great question. I remember when we started Namaste Solar, none of us had an MBA. We were all first-time entrepreneurs. We kind of didn't know what we were doing, but just fueled by passion for what we were doing. And we thought we were all alone. We thought we were the only ones coming up with a quirky way of doing things. But then we started to meet others, and it was so refreshing. Some of it was from books, reading The Companies We Keep by John Abrams about South Mountain Company, or reading Jack Stack's books about employee ownership. And that was such wonderful news for us. I remember when we read I think the title was A Socialist Company Grows Up, and it was about Chroma Technology Corp there in Vermont. And we just reached out by email to Paul Millman, and thank goodness he responded. But we were so happy to have found Chroma, and then we started comparing notes and talking, and then it just led from there, and we started meeting other companies, and then we learned about Equal Exchange and Organic Valley. But yeah, I wish there were a better way to learn about what other companies are out there. Some of it is just proactively reading, surfing certain websites, coming to conferences like this where you meet them, because there is so much you can learn and just in new vocabulary words on this language and getting better at the language of employee ownership and multiple stakeholders and B Corps and all those other things. Some of it's just learning more vocabulary words. Some of it is learning, exact how to, nuts and bolts, how do you make this happen? But some of it's just plain inspiration. So many times we have been inspired by other companies. And even though we didn't exactly replicate what they were doing, the inspiration that it provided to us helped us to come up with our own slight twist on what they were doing. And it is incredibly valuable to meet other companies that are doing neat things and just to be inspired by it, learn new vocabulary words. But it is hard to say, here's one place where you can go. There's no white pages like there used to be, where you could just, let me look up all the different employee-owned companies who have non-voting preferred stock. Unfortunately, a directory like that doesn't exist.
All right, so we're at time. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll be moving on to our first round of sessions. We'll start at 10:15. So the last question was just about candidacy period and requirements for being accepted as an owner beyond putting in the 5K. I think that's something a lot of employee-owned companies really do think about in terms of the impact of what does this new role mean as an employee owner versus just as being hired on as an employee. So what do you look for, and how do you communicate that?
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's no right or wrong. Different companies, some companies gift ownership, or if you're an ESOP, you're kind of automatically become a part of the retirement plan. Some companies it's $500 buy-in, some it's $20,000, some it's you wait 3 months, others you wait 5 years. This is just what felt right to us, and I'd say sometimes that's a good way to do it, is what feels right for you. But we like having a 1-year candidacy period. Anybody can become a candidate, so we hire somebody as an employee. There's a process that's very easy to take, but we want people to step forward and say, I want to do this. It's easy to become a candidate. You get assigned a mentor. There's a training period. We call it a candidate curriculum, where you learn about our core values and our mission. You learn our history, you learn financial literacy, how to read financial statements, and a whole bunch of other things. And we found that employees really love going through that candidacy period, and they learn a lot from their mentors. And then they can choose if they want to become a co-owner at the end of that or not. Most do. Some say, you know what, the small business ownership thing's not for me, and that's okay. That means the candidacy period helped to do part of what it's intended to do. But we've learned over the years that the more you put into that candidacy period, the better it serves you, because not everybody is born a small business owner or entrepreneur. But I do firmly believe that for people who want it, it's something that can easily be trained. It just takes some care, some forethought, some conscientiousness to help people. For example, just not being able to know how to read financial statements. It's an easy thing to teach, and some people don't get it right away, but repetition really helps. And if you practice open book management, you're doing that regularly. Yeah, it's great to train co-owners, and you can see it happening. That people end up contributing and being fantastic small business owners who never would have thought they could be beforehand.